afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on healthy research teams and labs. It's a really exciting initiative that folks more qualified than me will be telling you all about. But while folks are still joining, I want to go through just a couple of logistics for today's webinar. If you attend webinars with us a lot, these are going to be familiar to you. But just reminding you that if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. That makes it way more easy for our panelists to find those questions and answer them for you. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send out both that recording and the slides to everyone who has registered. We will also post it on CGS's YouTube and on the CGS website. So if you need to dip out midway through for whatever reason, or if you know people who can't attend, they can get that recording in both of those places. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to CGS President Suzanne Ortega to introduce the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome, colleagues. We're very pleased to have you with us today. My name is Suzanne Ortega, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Council of Graduate Schools. I know some of you, but I know many of you who are joining us for this webinar today are faculty members. And while you are part of a CGS member institution, you yourselves may not be familiar with CGS as an organization. So if I might, I thought I would give a few words of context. So CGS is an organization that's been around 60 plus years, and during its life, it has served as the primary organization that works to advance graduate education and research in collaboration with our approximately 460 member universities. CGS supports that mission through an active agenda of advocacy in the policy arena, through innovative research and the development and sharing of best practices in graduate education. Our usual points of contact are with the graduate dean or the senior administrative official responsible for graduate education, but we are delighted to have all of you with us in this important conversation. I'm really thrilled to be having the opportunity to co-present today's webinar in conjunction with the University of Toronto, who are indeed CGS members and collaborators on the Healthy Teams and Research Lab initiatives. You know, a lot of important work has been done to change culture of graduate programs to make them more supportive, to embrace all people, all graduate students, and all perspectives. But for a long time, there's been a gap, I think, in the resources and the thinking that we've done to support the research teams and labs where many graduate students spend so much of their time. And as we all know, it is in these smaller groups and communities that graduate student identity and development and success is formed. So enter the University of Toronto's excellent project, Healthy Research Teams and Labs. I think I first heard Dean Joshua Barker talk about this initiative at a CGS meeting a couple years ago. And it wasn't long before we were talking about how might it be possible to think about bringing the concept and the model to the full range of CGS member institutions. So today you're going to hear about how the original concept was expanded and how you can use this resulting resources within your own research teams and labs. We'll also hear from a faculty member and a dean who is committed to the principles of healthy research teams to illustrate the kinds of opportunities to support students it brings. I want to make sure to also thank the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, who provided support and sponsorship that allowed CGS and the University of Toronto to work together on this project and scale Toronto's original initiative. So many, many thanks to HHMI for their commitment and their leadership. At this point, I've welcomed you, introduced CGS to you, and now it is really my privilege to introduce my colleague, Vice Provost Graduate Research and Education and Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at the University of Toronto, Dr. Joshua Barker. Joshua, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'd like to join you in welcoming everyone to this webinar. I found in the time we've been developing this framework that it's a domain of work that people in the graduate community are very excited about. So I'm grateful we're now able to bring our initiative to all CGS members. Next slide, please. So let me just give you a little outline of where we're going today. So I'm going to provide some background on the advisory committee and its work. I'm going to give an overview of the initiative framework and the kind of vision and interconnected values that it represents. And then we're going to have the bulk of the session to focus on how some colleagues are putting these commitments into practice. And these are perspectives, as President Ortega mentioned, from a faculty member's perspective and from a dean's perspective. And for that, we have Mary Ellen Lane, Dean of the Morningside Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at UMass, Chan Medical School, and we have Ruth Varner, Interim Director of the Institute for the Study of Earth, Oceans, and Space, and Professor of Biogeochemistry in the Department of Earth Sciences and Earth Systems Research Center at UNH. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some concrete actions that members can take to advance this initiative further in their own contexts. Next slide, please. So this is an initiative that starts from a fairly simple premise, which is that when we look at graduate studies broadly, the experience graduate students have when they are doing research is absolutely critical to their satisfaction and to their skills development for careers after they graduate. That research experience phase is so important. So a healthy research culture significantly influences personal, academic, and professional success, as well as overall well-being of all research team members. It's not just the students, but it's also the other members of the team, including faculty member, principal investigator, for example, postdocs that might be in a team, and staff members as well, lab techs and so on. It's all of these individuals who make up the team research environment. Of course, research teams come in all different shapes and sizes, and that you can find them across the full spectrum of disciplines. Some are co-located in labs, and that's often the image we have in our mind, but many are virtual. Some are on location doing field work, and they come also in different sizes. Some may be as small as 3 people or as many as dozens. And how they're managed varies greatly too. Some may be hierarchical, some may be more egalitarian. It's that kind of diversity and range is important, and it is not something that we find to be inherently problematic. What we have noticed, however, that while the structure and approach to research teams may vary, it's also true that optimal research cultures are fundamentally underpinned by collaboration, belonging, creativity, and support. And in the absence of a healthy research culture, the competitive nature of research and increased focus on producing research outputs can lead to a number of things, including unrealistic expectations, decreased work-life balance, strained advisory relationships, added stress, and diminished well-being. And when this happens, we risk creating a culture that is not fostering the best conditions for research and research integrity. Next slide, please. Given this importance of research culture, what are institutions doing and what can they do to help move it in a positive direction? And if we look around, we can see that the root causes of issues can be addressed at multiple levels. They can be addressed at the level of advisory relationships. They can be addressed at the level of graduate programs in terms of program structure and program climate. But they can also be addressed at the level of the research team and the lab. And I think it's important to recognize that I think all of our institutions have spent many years taking practical steps to influence many practices at these levels. And these include policies to encourage appropriate conduct, the development of educational resources for one-on-one advising and the research environment more broadly, as well as quality assurance processes to ensure programs are always continuing to innovate and deliver high quality to students. But what we have found when we kind of looked around our own institution and then began talking to those at other institutions through the advisory group was that research teams and labs, although being a key pillar of healthy research culture, have not always been actively targeted for support. And so that is why we have the focus of this initiative on this area. Next slide, please. Developing this initiative has been a collective effort by many. Last year, with the support of HHMI, as Suzanne mentioned, CGS established an advisory committee focused on advancing positive and healthy practices within research teams across CGS member institutions. And you can see the members of that advisory committee on the right there. I just really want to give a huge shout out to all members of that group, as well as to Professor Ortega for her leadership and for championing this initiative all along. It's been an incredibly valuable journey, and I'm really glad we've been able to bring it to this point. Next slide, please. Now you're going to have an opportunity, and maybe you've already had an opportunity to look at some of these things online. But let me just give you a quick overview of the framework and the key outputs that we've made available. So there's really two main outputs that we can focus on. One is documents related to the context and recommendations. And here we have an executive summary. We have an outline of the vision and values for healthy research teams. And then we have recommendations for all members in the graduate community to develop and support healthy research teams in their own institutions. And we're really hoping that those recommendations will form the basis of a kind of multiplier effect within graduate schools across CGS member institutions. In addition to that, we have what we're calling a statement of commitment. And this is something that invites advisors to become signatories and to enact the vision and values that we've outlined here in these documents to their own research teams and labs. And that statement is something that people can sign on to through the CGS website. And they'll also get an appendix to these reports, which provides just practical activities and tasks that they can do in their own environments to support each element of the commitment that they're making. Next slide, please. So this is just what the context and recommendations document looks like. And as I mentioned, these recommendations are very practical and they apply to people at different levels. Like they're directed, we have recommendations for different levels that are playing an active role in shaping research culture. So there are recommendations for graduate deans, for graduate chairs and program directors, for advisors or PIs, and for students themselves, plus additional academic leaders. And I'm like in my own environment, for example, I think of the vice president's research portfolio as being one that is absolutely critical in this domain. Next slide, please. And then this is that second piece of the initiative, which is the statement of commitment and the appendix of promising practices. And really here, the former consists of 7 key values that a research team leader or member can sign on to. And they can do this online on the CGS website. And they can choose there whether or not they want CGS to offer to share this information with their institution. And by signing on to this commitment, an individual will get the ability to download some digital assets, like the logos on the right, which they can put on their lab website or possibly print out and put on their lab door. And our hope here is that becoming a signatory will give them a leg up in their efforts to recruit top researchers to their team. We know that the incoming generation of young researchers are really attentive to the question of the environments that they're coming into. And we want people who have adopted these principles to be able to make public their commitment and to use it as a recruitment device. And as I mentioned, the appendix is really to provide very straightforward, concrete, practical steps that lab leaders or other team leaders can take to help foster a healthy research culture in their setting. Next slide, please. These promising practices, like the statement of commitment, are organized around the key values that underlie the vision for the initiative. And I'm just putting this up to kind of give you an outline of what that is. In a nutshell, this is the Healthy Research Teams and Labs initiative, and it focuses on group collaboration, leadership, professional development, research innovation and integrity, advising and mentorship, well-being, and equity and belonging. And all of these things we see as part of a kind of a wheel because they're interdependent values. And we're not creating a hierarchy of those values. We see them as being deeply interdependent and interconnected. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Mary Ellen Lane and Ruth Varner, who are going to provide their perspectives on how this initiative might fit into work they are doing on their own campuses at UMass and at UNH. So over to you, Mary Ellen.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. It's really great to be part of this. So I'm Mary Ellen Lane. I'm the Dean of the Morningside Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at UMass Chan Medical School. And my role today is to give you a dean's perspective. So go to the next slide. Yeah, so I want to give you a little bit of relevant background that informs my perspective. I'm coming at this from about 25 years of involvement with graduate education. You know, first in my early career, faculty at Rice University, and then later through leadership and administrative roles, both at the UTMD Anderson Graduate School and at UMass Chan Graduate School. You know, during my time here at UMass Chan, which has actually been quite a long time now, I started out as associate dean, and in that role, I was very student-facing. And so I really got a very good understanding of the student experience in training in biomedical sciences. And then in my role more recently as the dean, I've really pivoted to working with faculty. And so that has given me sort of both sides of, you know, understanding the student and the training experience. Now, I do want to say a word about, you know, being the dean of a graduate school of biomedical science, which unlike the graduate dean at a comprehensive university, GSBS deans like myself tend to be really intricately involved in a lot of the academic decision-making that affects our training environments. So it's both a feature and a bug that the faculty have delegated a lot of the decisions to the dean. I've been kind of working to step back into a more sort of enrollment management and support for mentoring role and give the decision-making back to the faculty. But it is important to note that while I do have probably a lot more direct oversight of the training environment than a typical graduate dean, what goes on in the laboratory and the research group is still considered to be, the province of faculty and very autonomous province of the faculty. So my approach is really to facilitate and not to dictate, and to be responsive to the needs that are articulated by the faculty and the students to foster an environment where everybody can thrive. So that kind of balancing act really informs the approach that I take. So next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, right. So, there's a lot of interest, as both Dr. Barker and Dr. Ortega have mentioned. There's a lot of interest right now in mentoring, and more than I've seen, in my 25 years. Students are often expressing this as a desire for, faculty to be required to go through mentor training. Or development, there really is a lot of genuine interest, especially from junior faculty, about how to excel in this area. And senior faculty and department chairs, I think, are very cognizant of the fact that leading research teams is critical to the success of the junior faculty that they are hiring and investing in. And so creating a ecosystem that supports junior faculty and attracts students to their departments is really critical for the whole department. So when I heard Joshua give the workshop at CGS, I think it was in 23, I thought, well, hey, this is another great resource that we can provide to our graduate faculty, especially as science has become so team focused. The traditional focus has been on the mentor-mentee relationship. And while this is undoubtedly a critical aspect for scientific productivity and scholarly development, team health can often be a blind spot, especially for new PIs. I think that was certainly my experience as a new PI. But also for students who might be less experienced and have less exposure to research when they come into graduate school. And I think that's really the equity angle here, that by sort of focusing on this at the enterprise level, we can really make it easier for people from all backgrounds to kind of navigate the complexities of research training. And I wanted to point out something that is probably fairly intuitive and obvious, but this really turned up on our internal evaluations and some surveys that we do, particularly with one of our T32 training grants. Students experience the highest sense of belonging in their research group, okay? And the sense of belonging sort of falls off a little bit as you go out to department, school, university. This is really important to the student experience, right? They see their peers experiencing that sense of belonging, and it becomes an expectation. If that expectation isn't met, that can have a negative impact on their training experience and on their development. This being part of this project, I think, gives us another resource that all members can use to build a sense of community and belonging that supports every member's development. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned, my experience as a faculty member, PI, and associate dean, and now dean, has given me a lot of perspective on some of the challenges of leading and managing a research team. And I want to highlight some of the common pain points that I've heard from both students and faculty. And I want to be clear here that when I say common challenges, I'm not talking about situations where there's misconduct or mistreatment, really, but rather kind of persistent challenges in fostering a healthy research environment that are rooted in misunderstandings and miscommunications. These can feel just as impactful to the students. Those scenarios that occur where there is greater ethical or mistreatment concerns have to be managed very differently. But the promising practices that this project puts forward are really all about encouraging thinking about expectations and standards for work-life balance, boundaries, criteria for recognition and advancement, and communicating them rather than relying on implicit understanding of a set of norms that we assume to be common. Typical struggles are around, not only differing expectations, but really on uncommunicated expectations. For students, for example, our students have kind of reasonable and generous paid time off, and regardless of how any individual faculty advisor feels about that, this is generally respected. But I hear from many students that they don't take their time off because they're afraid to ask for it. From an advisor's perspective, it might be unimaginable that a student would be apprehensive about asking for time off. But this proves to be true. And I think what you'll see in the practices that there's a lot of encouragement to state things that you think might actually be fairly obvious. Another big conflict that we've been dealing with a lot lately is kind of perceived differential treatment, especially as it, happens around authorship and conference attendance. And at the root of this actually is to an advisor, for example, it might be fairly obvious that before you spend $3,500 sending a student to a conference, they need to have a story to tell. But if that expectation isn't spoken, students perceive the differential treatment, and it has a very negative impact. So I think that, the bottom line here is to actually think about the things that you think are obvious and consider that they might not be obvious, especially as students really perceive, this vast power differential between themselves and their advisors. You can't over communicate, and you shouldn't be afraid to say things that you think might actually be obvious. I have a sort of humorous illustration about this on the next slide. I made this slide for another presentation, and I got such positive feedback that I actually really like to show it. I think all of us, certainly speaking for myself, when we hear hidden curriculum, it always feels like a bit of an accusation, like we're deliberately trying to obscure something to see who can decipher them and select people that way. But in reality, the hidden curriculum is not an intentional attempt to hide something. It is actually our immersion in a culture, right? And usually for many years, that is not clear to people that are just sort of coming into the culture. So we in academia are, the fish that don't understand what water is, and we might struggle to define something that's so fundamental that it's taken for granted. So this is really about recognizing that we might inadvertently create barriers by failing to consider and articulate the unspoken norms that really do shape our environment, right? And that really comes across loud and clear, I think, in the promising practices and the pledge. Next slide. Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the steps that we're taking to implement the healthy research teams and labs resources. And to do that, I just want to give you sort of the state of things and the progress toward building a mentoring support infrastructure into our graduate school over the past several years. So some of the things that we've done is to really build out my associate deans for student support engagement, career and professional development. These folks are involved in curricular and co-curricular development. And so there's an opportunity there to bring in kind of mentee training and curriculum around mentoring, both into first-year orientation, into the responsible conduct of research courses, into a lot of opt-in workshops, and then throughout the graduate curriculum. We have some faculty-driven initiatives. That's actually really important. I'm going to come back to that point a few more times. We have some grassroots faculty initiatives around forming mentoring interest groups. Okay, so these didn't really originate in the grad school, but we've, in the grad school, have been able to provide both financial support and administrative support and work with the Office of Faculty Affairs to really sponsor these initiatives and ensure that they are offered in a consistent manner. This includes a new faculty orientation and opt-in workshops that have mentoring as a topic. A couple of things that we've done, and this is, again, really has come up in a very organic way through what faculty have asked for. So the majority of the students that come into our graduate school, they come in without being matched to a prospective mentor at first, right? And they go through a series of research rotations to identify their thesis mentor. So we started doing flash talks. We actually started this in the pandemic because honestly, we couldn't get the poster boards into a room where there was enough social distancing. So we started these 5-minute talks where all the faculty who are interested in recruiting students to their labs will give us sort of an overview of the scientific questions. They talk about available projects. And then, a couple of faculty members would wrap up their flash talk with a slide about their mentoring philosophy, or brag about, the great things that their alumni have gone off to do, or how many fellowships their students have won, right? So other people have seen this, and now this is standard. Everybody ends their talk talking about their mentoring philosophy. And this is really fun. And I cannot stress enough the importance of the fact that this is, faculty originated, and it's a lot of fun. The students are right away exposed to faculty talking about mentoring in a very positive environment, right? Now, we also created a database that students can access, of course, the same information basically asynchronously, so they can go and look and who has projects available, read the relevant papers. And then at the request of students, we created a space in this database for faculty to kind of list their mentoring credentials, okay? Awards that they've won for mentoring or teaching, workshops that they've attended, okay? Being a signatory on the Healthy Research Teams and Labs principles. And this, again, creates a sort of, cascade effect where other faculty are seeing that, students are responding positively to this. So they start thinking about how they can put this information forward as well. And finally, the way that we use these kinds of resources, particularly the AAMC mentoring compacts for the American Association of Medical Colleges, has a graduate training steering group that I'm very involved in. And several years ago, they came up with some mentoring compacts that outline kind of students and advisors' responsibilities. So when we are mediating conflicts, we rely heavily on this document to go through them with the individual faculty and students. And so again, that sort of creates a space for us to bring in the Healthy Research Teams and Labs documents in that context as well. So immediate plans on the horizon. Next slide. A lot of assumptions there. Right, as I said, we will be reviewing the promising practices and the advisor commitment, and asking the advisors to consider signing this when we're managing acute conflicts. Also, we're also encouraging faculty to write their own handbooks using things like the AAMC Compact or these guidelines. There's some talk about engaging the department chairs or having some assessment going on. I will say that I'm taking a very cautious approach to that. The department chairs that I work with, I think that I'm very privileged to work with a cohort of chairs that are, in fact, very interested in having a positive training ecosystem in their department and supporting their faculty. So I will engage the chairs when I think it's going to be helpful. And I do this sort of cautiously and try to maintain confidentiality with the faculty. But, I do visit each department about once a year just to kind of give an overview of what's going on in the graduate school. And I think for the coming year, I'm going to be, in addition to updates, just really talking about mentoring resources so that I can widely disseminate these to people at the department level. And they can sort of make decisions about the extent that they want to use these in their own mentoring. At our new faculty orientation, this is not required for all new faculty, but the norm is kind of that everybody participates in this, so we can present the statement of commitments and the promising practices sort of as a formal presentation, give people the documents, among other resources to think about. The T32, the training grant faculty, and those faculty who are working with students on individual fellowships, these are great faculty to champion these kinds of resources. They have to write mentoring plans. they have to demonstrate that they're paying attention to the mentoring environment, right? And they are usually early adopters of any of the kinds of workshops that we are presenting for faculty. So this is another real community that could benefit from having these documents. And finally, we are starting to offer opt-in workshops. And again, this is my culture, and understand your culture as well. I don't think at our place requiring people to do much of anything in this realm would be received very well, but there is just so much genuine interest that we are now sort of working on building the capacity to deliver these kind of opt-in workshops at a regular basis to faculty, where we really can talk about these documents and the principles. Now, I want to, next slide, make a very important point. So there was a paper that came out in 2024 in Nature Biotechnology, The Rise of Teamwork and Career Prospects in Academic Science. And Mabel Endelon and colleagues, which include Donna Ginther, looked at the growth in team size, okay? And team size is defined essentially as the number of authors on a paper. And the sort of attainment of independent careers and the kind of exiting of science. So this is you can just click on the next animation. Okay, so they make a lot of points in here. I just want to drill down to what's really important for this discussion. They show that larger team size can correlate with lower attainment of independent careers and increased exit. And this is really the individualized reward structure of academia has not adapted to the fact that, team-based productivity is really the norm right now. So why does it matter? Well, we have to recognize the potential for competition and conflict. Team science is more important than ever. Healthy teams are really, really important. But not only do we need to have clear and transparent criteria for authorship, but we got to be attentive to making sure that everybody has opportunities for individual contribution and for recognition, and encourage equal access to training and development in research scholarship. And I have no answers to this, right? This is something that we're actively grappling with, and I think this paper, even though the conclusions are fairly intuitive, it really does make an important point that our focus on teams cannot be at the expense of individual opportunity and development. All right, concluding. Next slide. So this is my ecosystem. I think what's really important is that everybody sort of defines their own. Who are the people that are going to be empowered and committed to help kind of implement the principles in the Healthy Labs and Research Teams initiative. I can't stress enough having faculty champions. In our institution, grad program directors empowerment is really highly variable. But working with the chairs and vice chairs can actually be the way to reach kind of the broader community. And of course, as I mentioned, working with training grant PIs, I think is going to be another important resource in moving this along. So identify your people and, implement accordingly. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. And now we're going to pass it over to Ruth Varner. Ruth.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. So thank you, Mary Ellen. You really introduced sort of the ecosystem I guess I live in as a faculty member, and have just currently stepped into an interim director of our large research institute here on campus at the University of New Hampshire. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today because I work in a large research group. I've worked in multiple large over 100 member research projects, and we've grappled with a lot of the questions and issues that that the Healthy Research Teams and Labs initiative is really supporting. And I'm excited to have this toolkit to help and share with other folks, because we definitely need it in our communities. Just as a little background, I started here at the University of New Hampshire as a graduate student, and became a technician. So worked with graduate students and undergraduates in a laboratory, was a research faculty, and then became tenure track faculty. And so I've watched a lot of students come through both my lab and many other labs here at the university, and have really learned from them the kinds of things that they're looking for to support a healthy environment. And I can say that these were not conversations, as maybe many of you know, that came up when we were undergraduates or graduate students. And I'm excited that this is where the field is going, and that we have these tools, and also that will be supported, I think, by our graduate schools and by our graduate programs as faculty in developing this kind of documentation and having these conversations with our group. I chose this picture today because I feel like this is an example of the kind of work that I do with my students. I spend a lot of time in the field, and the picture behind me is actually a field site where I work in northern Sweden. It's a remote location where it's really important to understand both the safety and the health of my research group. And so I don't have a lot of slides today. I just kind of wanted to focus in on two sort of key things that have been really important as I've grown my research group and also worked across multiple research groups, both across the United States and as well as with other countries. I also am the PI of a NSF research traineeship grant, and that grant has been an amazing opportunity to work with faculty to develop these kinds of policies for our graduate research fellows in the program. And they have advisors who are outside of the program. And so it's been really interesting to talk with their advisors around how we develop projects with these research fellows, and how we support their safe and healthy approach to those projects, as well as how they interact with their own research groups. And so you can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to just comment about two things that we do within my research group to ensure, or to try to create a safe and healthy environment. And one of those is this co-production of a research group. I guess we call it a manual. And really what that is as I think Joshua mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity to put down sort of what our group norms are, kind of what the expectations are. It's for new group members. So when we're recruiting new members to our research group, we can share this documentation, and they have an idea of expectations and how to work through expectations as well as conflict, and how they might be assessed in their progress each year. We sit down each year and go through this document as a group. So undergraduates, grad students, postdocs, myself, and other faculty that are in my research group will sit down and walk through the document. It has a lot of resources, both internally and externally, for students with respect to funding, as well as other things they might need, excuse me, to support their progress. And what's exciting, I find, about that progress, or that process, is that everybody has an opportunity to comment on the document. It's a living document, and we're able to update it each year with new opportunities or things that are sort of out of date, or thinking about our ever-changing landscape, and really thinking about how we communicate that in a document that's static. It's really a great opportunity to communicate and figure out what we need to add and maybe what we don't need in this document any longer. One thing that's been super important, which I know that really came along because of a conflict, is really thinking about how you resolve conflict and how you make a plan for that resolution. And I've been really lucky to work with a group of team scientists. So Mary Ellen was just talking a lot about how science has become really team-based, and I work with a group out of Colorado State University that studies teams, and they've really helped us develop conflict resolution strategies for teams, and really think about and walk through conflicts together. And having an external person help you with that is really important. So encouraging universities to have that kind of external facilitator, or some kind of spudman, or some person that's able to help you get through conflicts, is really really helps the students and the faculty feel safe in those conversations. And then the other thing that I focus a lot on in my work is around field safety. And this has become, an ever increasing issue. I think over the last 10 years, there've been a lot of publications around how folks are can feel unsafe when they're in the field, and that we didn't have really good guidelines around that. And so both the University of New Hampshire, as well as a large NSF research grant that I have called Emerge, have developed a really good field safety and logistics planning document. And part of it is the planning process of going in the field and, what do you need to feel safe? What kind of training should you have if you're going to remote settings like the one behind me? What kind of information do we need to have before we leave? What kind of information do we have to have access to when you're in the field and you're maybe don't have a cell phone or you have other communication challenges? And I think this is the kind of thing that there are a lot of resources for, but I'm excited that this is part of this conversation, is thinking about what is all of that preparation that you have to do before you go in the field so that you have a safer experience and successful experience. And then when you get back from the field, having that conversation about what went well, what didn't, what did we forget, what can we add to this field safety piece the next time to make it successful. And I think it's that, kind of process, that circular process of reviewing what you've developed and then coming back to it after you've been through an experience and then improving it. And that really helps build community. I find that you build trust amongst the members of your research group, and you can also then deal with any conflict that arises in those situations. I've been really lucky to have a lot of graduate students who've been excited to take on this challenge or this role with me, and to be able to develop these documents and feel comfortable and safe and honest, be able to share exactly what they think you might need or they might need to be safe in these environments. And it's not always easy because, I've been going in the field for almost 30 years now, and I have a really different level of risk that I'm comfortable with because of that. And I would say that, every student I've worked with has a different amount of risk that they are comfortable with. And so those are really good and really important conversations that you need to have before you take a student somewhere or you're doing field work. A lot of the guidelines in this safety fieldwork and field safety planning can be translated to lab safety as well. And so not just the physical, but really that psychological safety that allows people to be healthy, successful, and happy. And I really just wanted to comment on both of those two documents that we've been spending a lot of time working on. And thank again, Mary Ellen, for really bringing that bigger picture and perspective from a dean, because I think as I move into a leadership role, and I know our graduate school dean is online today, it's such a great opportunity for us to bring these kinds of tools to our faculty, especially those doing a lot of research, either here on campus or off campus, and to ensure that our grad students, can succeed, end up getting credit for the work they're doing, and then also stay in our discipline, because that's really ultimately what, we want them to do after they're trained. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruth. So maybe we could just take the slides down now for a minute, and we have an opportunity to take some questions, and some folks have already put some questions in the question box, and so I can just read them out for people. Do you have any examples of how you have partnered with non-academic units to support healthy research culture? For example, student affairs or university wellness offices? I mean, I could start off by providing one example from my context, which is just in respect to mentorship and supervision and that aspect of the work, and that's an area where, as Ruth mentioned, having people who are kind of external to the academic environment to help mediate conflicts can be really productive. And in our context, we've tried out different models, and one of the models we had at one time was trained mediators who were students themselves, sort of peer mediators, to help really work with students in terms of coaching them on how to handle conflict that might emerge with their supervisor. Ultimately, we decided to move to a different model. And we were able to bring a couple of social workers on board. And those folks work closely with our student affairs team, but they're actually within our School of Graduate Studies. And they are kind of working full time on mediation and advice in the mentoring relationship. Much of that is in the context of teamwork. Maybe I'll just move on to another question. Can you say more about the assessment aspect of the co-production of the research group manual, assessment of the document, or assessment of mentees? So maybe I think that one's for you, Ruth.
Yeah, I think when in my kind of context, what we do is we set goals each year in the beginning of the year, and then we use those as a way to sort of assess learning and talk about where people feel like they've gotten each year. And so it's not a formal assessment, a survey or that kind of thing, but it's an opportunity to sit down and talk through about like where your goals are, check in on them I would say we check in every 3 months to kind of see where things are. And we try to set, SMART goals. I'm sure you've heard of those, but thinking about like steps that they can take to get to them. So not just a goal for the year, but how do we get there? What do we do each month to get there? And then that gives them an opportunity to say, well, I'm way behind on this. Let's recreate, my timeline. Let's adjust the timeline and be thinking about maybe some life situations that have come up where they've, it's really distracted them from trying to achieve a certain thing, like finish a paper or even write a couple of pages that month. And I think that's what's really important, is setting up that regular communication where you can assess kind of where people are. And I guess that's what I would say for that answer.
Thank you. There's also a question about, is there research literature yet about how the Healthy Labs resources in general affect student success and well-being? Because I think, people are always interested in evidence base and as a way of convincing people to get involved. And we had, I think, the interesting example of research that Mary Ellen provided. On this particular initiative, it's so fresh that we don't have results yet, because it was literally launched by CGS about a week ago or so. But it is actually based, like the model itself and the approach is based on pretty significant review of literature, some of it scientific, some of it more gray literature, frankly. But sort of we pulled a lot of that together and allowed that to form the basis, together with a lot of consultation in our community about how to approach this. And so we're interested to see what the results are. And we're interested to think about how our student experience surveys adequately reflect some of the factors here that we're trying to put into play, because we ask students a lot about supervision, but we don't ask them a lot about team, and we ask them about climate, but where exactly that climate is located and what the dimensions of that, I think, need to be thought through more. Another question that I quickly wanted to address related to whether this model is something that we've considered or seen implemented in the context of social sciences and humanities. And it's a great question, and it's kind of been a question that's been with us through the whole development of the framework and the toolkit. And yes, the contributors to this whole process have come from all disciplines. It did start out in our minds as a lab-focused initiative, but we've had humanities folks all along the way, particularly from the digital humanities, and then in the social sciences from team-based sociologists and so on. But I myself am an anthropologist and ethnographer, usually the ultimate sort of lonely discipline in some ways. And I have an ethnography lab here at the University of Toronto where we're implementing it. So we're very hopeful that the framework will be useful across all disciplines. And then I just wanted to provide one more question, perhaps, before we wrap up. And this one perhaps is for Mary Ellen. As graduate deans, what actions do you feel comfortable taking when you discover a persistently unhealthy lab environment, as evidenced by high lab turnover, resignations, not completing degrees? Or do you pass that to the chair?
Yeah. Well, to answer honestly, I don't feel comfortable with anything, but what I do is the actions I do take, regardless of my comfort. So this is this is a great question, and it's something that we sort of work on a lot. We've actually put sort of a standard operating procedure in place recently, and this is based on another AAMC document called the Appropriate Treatment of Research Trainees. And you know, we sort of have a series of actions that we take that are really kind of based on what we understand the complaints to be. Everything from, you know, offering a mediated conversation to actually engaging the chair. So I think in the cases that we're really concerned about in the example in the question, like high lab turnover, not completing degrees, that is a big red flag. And you know, there it's really time to you know, to involve the chair and to actually have an honest conversation. So what is important is, you know, probably I could say to the program director, make sure that person doesn't get any students. Okay, that's not a really honest and helpful way to do that. But what I do, and it's not comfortable at all, is talk to the faculty member and say, we're gonna have a pause on you recruiting students to your lab for now, and these are the reasons. All right, and any current students in the lab, we just try to work with. Again, we work with their advisory committees as well, just to make sure that, you know, they are getting some oversight and that their progress moves as smoothly as it can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mary Ellen. Okay, so if we could just return to the slides for a moment as we wrap up our session. So we did want to just wrap up by inviting all of you to visit the Healthy Research Teams and Labs website to learn more about the initiative. We will be, the slides and the recording are going to be sent out to all the registrants and will be on the CGS website and YouTube channel. We invite all of you here and share the word. Please sign the statement of commitment and commit to creating a healthy research team or lab. Promote this commitment by using the logos that we provide in your physical environment, as well as on your personal website, your lab website, social media, and so on. Sign up for the listserv, the CGS listserv, to access more information and learn about future events in this area. And then think of creative ways to share this initiative widely in your own graduate communities in ways that work for your own institutional context. And we recognize that this context differs from place to place and where you're at. And so you'll need to meet your community where it is, not always where you wish it would be. But we think that the framework and the toolkit that we've provided is an easy way in. That's our hope. And also provides you with a kind of overarching framework that doesn't have to come from your own institution, about where the broader graduate community that is represented by the Council of Graduate Schools feels that research culture needs to go. And research, you know, culture change takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. I think this is going to be years and years in the works, but we can bring change. And very often the greatest ambassadors of this change are our graduate students. So thank you very much to our speakers today, to President Ortega for the support, for HHMI for their support throughout this process. And thank you all to the attendees for joining with us today. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.